Princess stood on the balcony of the Crystal Palace. The twin suns were setting, painting the sky in harsh oranges and reds. She clenched her hands around the railing. Her heart was heavy. The court below was full of whispers. Eyes that once admired her now carried suspicion. Betrayal was a word that floated in every corridor, and knew it. Her mother, the queen, had warned her. "Trust is a gift, my daughter, give it sparingly." But she had never imagined the day would come so soon. She felt it in the way the courtiers looked at her. Not all, but many. Some masks hid knives behind polite smiles. The court was beautiful, yet deadly. Crystal walls reflected light, but they also reflected hidden envy. She had seen it for months, every subtle glance, every hesitant bow, and now the tension was unbearable. Her gaze fell to the human guard standing silently behind her. A young man, but strong, unshakable. Unlike the others, he did not falter when the eyes of the court pierced him. Unlike the others, he never whispered. Was human, but he had an air of loyalty that seemed unbreakable. Had met him months ago during a routine inspection. She remembered thinking how out of place he seemed among alien warriors. His uniform was plain, his movements simple, but there was a steadiness in him that was rare. In a palace of shifting shadows was a rock. "Princess," he said softly, his voice calm, "you mustn't stand here alone. The air carries whispers. They are dangerous." Turned to him, his dark eyes met hers, and for the first time that day she felt a spark of relief, not safety, relief. She could not let herself trust anyone else, not yet. "I know," she replied, her voice barely above a whisper. "But I have to see. I need to know who stands with me and who does not." Nodded, silently acknowledging her courage. Then, without another word, he positioned himself closer, his presence a shield she could feel even without contact. The palace doors opened and the court entered, felt the weight of hundreds of eyes on her. Some friendly, many others hidden in hostility. She held her head high. The crown of her people gleamed in the last rays of sunlight, but it felt heavier than ever. Her mother's words echoed in her mind. "You will face the choice of trust soon, and the wrong choice could break everything." A sudden movement caught her eye. Lord, a senior advisor, stepped forward with a smile too sharp to be honest. He bowed deeply. "Princess, the council awaits your decision on the new trade alliance. Your people need your guidance." Studied him, his voice was smooth, practiced. But his eyes, those calculating eyes, made her heart sink. She knew him, she knew ambition when she saw it, and she knew betrayal when it hid behind courtesy. Her fingers trembled on the railing. A decision needed to be made. One wrong step, one word spoken carelessly, and the court could turn. Alliances could shatter. Moved slightly, just enough that she could feel his steady presence. No words, no advice, just loyalty. And in that moment she realized something powerful. Loyalty could shine brighter than any blade, brighter than the most deceitful smile. Drew a deep breath. The suns dipped below the horizon, leaving the palace bathed in the first glow of alien moonlight. Shadows stretched long across the floor. The whispers grew louder, circling her like a storm. And she braced herself. She knew betrayal was coming. She knew the council would test her. And she knew that some of those she trusted most might fail her. But she also knew this. Not all hearts could be bought, and not all eyes could be fooled. Somewhere among the shifting loyalties of her court, a single human stood ready. A single human noticed the truth. And that truth might save her yet. The grand hall was immense. Crystal chandeliers hung like frozen stars. Light shimmered across polished floors, but the warmth was false. The council waited. Each seat held someone who smiled at her yet plotted against her. Entered, her gown flowing behind her like liquid silver. She felt their eyes crawl over her. Some measured, some hungry, and above all, some hiding venom beneath courtesy. Followed silently, close enough that she felt the strength of his presence without needing words. He had become more than a guard. He was a living anchor in a sea of doubt. "Princess," Lord began, voice smooth as honey, "the matter of the trade alliance with the system requires your judgment. They offer technology we cannot refuse, yet some argue the terms favor them too heavily." He paused, eyes flicking to the others, waiting for the murmurs to rise. The council had grown restless. They hungered for conflict, could feel it. Every movement, every breath carried a threat. She lifted her chin. "Explain the terms," she said, voice calm, betraying none of her fear. Several advisors leaned forward. One by one they presented their reports. Numbers, promises, secret clauses, every word was designed to confuse, to trip her. They expected hesitation. They expected a mistake. And then it came, the trap. Lord's hand rose subtly, pointing to a clause hidden deep in the contract. "Princess," he said softly, "surely you see. The demand control of our mineral reserves. If we accept, our people's lifeblood will be in alien hands. This alliance is betrayal in disguise." Gasp swept the room. Eyes darted to her, awaiting her reaction. Some hoped for fear, some hoped for a misstep. Mind raced. She had anticipated this. She had studied the contracts. She had seen the clause long before they dared mention it. But the question wasn't the clause, it was the court. Who would support her? Who would side with ambition instead of truth? Shifted beside her, subtle, almost invisible. But she felt it like a heartbeat. His presence reminded her of one thing she could rely on: loyalty. One human who noticed the truth when everyone else played shadows. Her gaze returned to the council. "The clause exists," she said, voice steady. "But they have also offered unprecedented medical technology. Our people suffer without it. I will negotiate, yes, but I will not let fear decide our fate." Whispers erupted, some nodding, some scowling. Smile hardened, but it didn't reach his eyes. He had hoped she would panic. He had hoped she would betray her own people by hesitation. Stepped closer ever so slightly, enough that anyone watching would see a simple guard adjusting his stance. But knew why he moved. His loyalty was a shield, a quiet, unshakable promise that she was not alone. Lord leaned in, lowering his voice. "You cannot trust them, not fully. You must see the danger before it's too late." Met his gaze. She saw the ambition, the hunger, the betrayal he wore like perfume. And she saw something else, an opportunity. "I see it," she said, "but I also see who stands with truth and who seeks only power." A murmur ran through the council. Some stiffened, some frowned, and his hand twitched, betraying anger he could not hide. Sighs never left her. No words, no advice, just the quiet certainty that she could lean on. Drew herself taller. Every whisper of doubt, every hidden knife in the room only fueled her resolve. She would not falter, she would not bend, not for fear, not for ambition. The suns had set fully now. The moons cast pale light across the council hall. Shadows stretched, long and threatening. But shadows could not hide loyalty. Shadows could not erase truth. And in that pale light, one human stood unwavering. One human saw the loyalty when all others saw only ambition. Inhaled deeply. The battle had only begun. And she knew deep in her heart that some storms could only be weathered with courage and a steadfast friend by her side. The council had tested her. They had hoped for fear, but fear had no place in her heart, only vigilance, only loyalty, and a human who would not look away. She knew now that betrayal could come in many forms, and it would. But she also knew this: loyalty was stronger than any threat. And would remind her of that every single step of the way. The night was thick in the palace. Crystal walls reflected the pale moonlight, casting fractured shadows across the halls. Walked silently, her silver gown whispering against the floor. She could feel eyes on her even in the quiet. She knew the council would not rest. Some would plot while others would watch. Every step she took was a step into uncertainty. But walked beside her, steady and silent, a living wall against the invisible knives. He said softly, "There are whispers you should hear. Some in the council speak of removing you from the throne. Soon." Her chest tightened. She had known ambition could turn into treachery. She had prepared for threats, battles, even sabotage. But hearing it spoken aloud made the danger real. "Who?" she asked, voice low, urgent. Shook his head. "Not all of them, and those who speak the loudest may not act first, but you must be careful, trust is rare here." Nodded, her mind raced. She thought of Lord, his smooth words hiding teeth ready to bite. She thought of the others, each with their own agenda, each ready to use fear and deception as weapons. She stopped at a balcony overlooking the palace gardens. The night wind cooled her face, but it could not calm the storm in her chest. "I thought I could see loyalty in this court," she said quietly, "but it feels like every day brings more shadows." Looked at her. There is loyalty, you just need to see it. You need to know who notices what others overlook. Sighs met his. In them she saw strength, honesty, and something rare in her world, a true heart, a human heart, not easily swayed, not easily bought. He did not speak of politics or fear. He only reminded her of truth. A sudden movement in the gardens caught her attention. Figures cloaked in dark robes moved like whispers among the trees. Spies? Assassins? She could not be certain. The palace walls were not enough to keep danger out. Not tonight. Stepped forward, hand on the hilt of his blade. "Stay behind me," he ordered. Hesitated, pride rose in her chest, but fear urged caution. She trusted him more than anyone else, but the risk was real. "Very well," she said, letting him lead. The cloaked figures did not attack immediately. They lingered, waiting, watching. His instincts were precise, honed from years of guarding others. He moved with a quiet authority, positioning himself between and the shadows. One of the cloaked figures finally spoke, voice cold and unfamiliar. "Princess, the council does not trust you. They say you are weak. They say you will ruin the kingdom." His heart pounded. She had felt the council's eyes earlier, but now the words cut deeper. These were not whispers. These were threats, and they were meant to test her, to shake her resolve. His hand tightened on his blade. "Leave her," he said, "or face the consequences." The figure laughed, low and cruel. "One human guard cannot stop what is coming." Stepped forward, fear and fury mixed in her chest. "You are wrong," she said, voice ringing with authority. "Loyalty is not measured by size or strength or number. It is measured by heart, and one human has already proven more loyal than all of you." The cloaked figures froze, then vanished into the night, leaving silence in their wake. His chest heaved. She realized something vital. Betrayal was not always visible. Sometimes it came hidden in smiles, in whispers, in shadows, and sometimes loyalty was the only weapon against it. Turned to her eyes steady. "You are safe for now," he said, "but they will not stop, not until they see you fall." Met his gaze. Gratitude, trust, and a deep, unshakable connection passed between them. In a world of treachery, had reminded her that some hearts could still be true. "I will not fall," she said, voice firm. "Not tonight, not ever, not while you stand with me." The wind carried their words into the gardens, where shadows still lingered. Somewhere in the palace, betrayal was stirring. Somewhere, ambition was sharpening its knives. But for now, loyalty had spoken louder than fear. And knew in the silence after the threat that this human, this unwavering presence, would be her anchor through the storm that was coming. The sun rose pale and cold over the palace. Its light spilled into the halls, but it did nothing to warm the atmosphere. Every corridor seemed longer, every shadow deeper. The court was restless, and felt it. She had barely slept. Every whisper of the night replayed in her mind. The cloaked figures, their words, the hidden threat in the council. She could feel danger closing in, but she would not show it, not to them. Walked beside her silently. His steps echoed with authority, steady and unshakable, had come to rely on his presence. In the treacherous court, he was her constant, her anchor. The council gathered again, this time in the Hall of Decisions. Crystal walls reflected their anxious expressions. The counselors spoke quietly among themselves, but their intentions were clear, to push her into a mistake. Lord rose first, eyes glinting with ambition. "Princess," he said smoothly, "we have learned troubling news. They have sent envoys demanding immediate approval of the trade terms. Delay is dangerous." He waited, letting tension build. Every counselor in the hall leaned in slightly, expecting her to falter. His gaze swept the room. She could feel the eyes of some fixed on her like knives. Others whispered behind hands, plotting. And then she noticed it, a small, almost imperceptible glance shared between two counselors. A signal, a plan. Betrayal. Her chest tightened. She had sensed it before, but seeing it so clearly made her stomach drop. Shifted beside her as if he could feel the danger too. "Princess," continued, "the threaten to withdraw entirely if we do not comply. Delay may cost us our alliances." His mind raced. She knew the council wanted panic. They wanted her to sign blindly, to make a mistake that could be used against her. She took a deep breath. "I understand the urgency," she said, voice calm, deliberate. "But my people's safety cannot be sacrificed for fear. We will negotiate terms that benefit both our kingdoms." Whispers spread through the hall. Some counselors fumed, some nodded reluctantly. Smile was tight, forced. Then it happened. A sudden shout, a crash. The doors at the far end of the hall burst open. Two counselors barged in, accusing one another of treachery. Shouts erupted. The room descended into chaos. The betrayal had begun. His heart raced. Every instinct screamed danger. Moved immediately, placing himself between her and the chaos. His blade was ready, his eyes scanning for threats. "Stay calm," he whispered, just enough for her to hear. Drew herself taller. Her voice rang out over the shouting. "Enough." The hall fell silent, everyone frozen by the authority in her tone. She saw the fear in the eyes of some counselors. She saw the anger in others. And then she noticed, standing slightly apart, calculating, waiting for her to falter. "You seek to test me," she said, her voice steady. "You hope to provoke fear, you hope I will betray my own people in panic, but I will not today, not ever." His presence beside her was a silent promise, loyalty, one human who saw the truth when others only saw power, one heart strong enough to withstand treachery. His face twisted. He had miscalculated. He thought she would crumble, but she did not. She stepped forward, eyes blazing. "Those who plot against their kingdom are no longer welcome here," she declared. "Your ambition blinds you, but loyalty will always prevail, always." The counselors froze. Some bowed their heads in shame. Others glared, but they dared not move. Words carried authority, strength, and unyielding resolve. Remained at her side, silent, steady. She could feel his loyalty like a shield, and in that moment realized something powerful. No betrayal could succeed where loyalty stood unbroken. The room fell into uneasy quiet. The first strike of betrayal had been made, but it had failed, and knew that more challenges were coming. The court would not stop. Danger would continue to rise. But she would be ready, and she would not face it alone. With one human at her side, she felt a courage she had never known, a loyalty stronger than any threat, a heart unshakable in the storm of ambition. The first strike had failed, but the war for the throne between loyalty and betrayal was only beginning. The palace felt colder than ever that evening. The crystal walls, which usually shimmered with elegance, now reflected only tension and fear. Walked through the corridors, her steps echoing against the polished floors. Every corner seemed to hide secrets. Every shadow seemed to whisper lies. Followed quietly, a constant presence. His dark eyes scanned every corridor, every doorway. He had been with her since the first signs of betrayal, and she had learned to trust his instincts without question. He said softly, his voice carrying urgency, "The council's discontent is growing. Tonight they will meet in secret. They speak of removing you from the throne entirely." His heart clenched. She had sensed this, but hearing it made the threat immediate. "Who will act first?" she asked, trying to keep her voice steady. Shook his head. "It is difficult to say, but they will strike while we are distracted. Their goal is to make you doubt yourself, to make you hesitate." She swallowed hard. Hesitation could cost everything. Her people's lives, the kingdom's future, all depended on her resolve. They reached the Hall of Secrets, a place she rarely entered. The hall was dimly lit, shadows curling along the walls. Inside, she saw two counselors and Lyra, speaking in hushed tones, glances darting toward hidden cameras and doors. "Princess," said, hand on her shoulder, "they are planning. Listen carefully, but stay hidden." Peered around a column. The counselors spoke of conspiracy. They mentioned allies, bribes, and methods to discredit her. Her stomach turned. They were closer to betrayal than she had feared. She clenched her fists. Every word they spoke was a blade aimed at her throne. Every plan was meant to isolate her, to make her question everyone, including. And yet she did not doubt him. He noticed her resolve tightening, saw her determination as clearly as she saw his unwavering loyalty. Had never faltered, never whispered a secret, never betrayed her confidence. And in a world where ambition ruled hearts, that mattered more than any blade or scheme. Mind raced. She had to act, but carefully. Any misstep would confirm their suspicions. Any hesitation would empower them. She moved quietly, stepping into the hall, flanked her, sword at the ready. The counselors froze. "Hist, what are you doing here?" "I am seeing the truth," she said, voice calm but piercing. "And I am choosing loyalty over fear. You speak of betrayal as though it is inevitable, but it is not. Not while one human stands by me." Lyra's eyes widened. She whispered, realization dawning. Said nothing. His gaze met hers, steady, unwavering. And in that silence understood something vital. Loyalty was louder than fear, stronger than deceit, and more enduring than ambition. She took a step closer to the counselors. "I will not be manipulated. I will not be intimidated. Your schemes are clear, and they will fail because you underestimate the strength of loyalty. You underestimate the human heart." Faltered then Lyra. The weight of their guilt showed in their posture. They had expected fear. They had expected hesitation. But instead they were met with conviction and an unshakable ally at her side. His voice softened, but it carried power. "I am surrounded by shadows, yes, but I see the truth. And the truth is not in whispers or plots. The truth is in loyalty, and that truth has not abandoned me." The counselors turned, defeated, as if her words had struck them with invisible force. His presence beside her was a reminder of every trial she had endured, every betrayal she had faced, every whisper she had ignored. For the first time that night, allowed herself a quiet breath of relief. The danger had not passed. The court was still treacherous, but she had acted decisively. She had faced betrayal head-on, and she had a human who would not waver, not for wealth, not for power, not for fear. His hand brushed hers briefly, a silent acknowledgement of trust and strength. She felt a warmth, fleeting but profound, in the midst of the shadows. Tonight betrayal had been revealed. Tonight loyalty had stood tall. And tomorrow, the battle for the throne would grow even fiercer. But knew one truth above all: as long as remained by her side, there was hope, there was courage, and there was a chance to turn the tide against the shadows. In the palace of betrayal, one human heart had made all the difference. The palace trembled with tension. Rumors and whispers had become shouts. The council's hidden plots were no longer secrets. The court was a storm, and Princess stood at its center. She moved through the grand hall, every step deliberate. Crystal chandeliers reflected her determination. Every advisor who had tried to deceive her now avoided her gaze. Every whisper carried fear. Followed silently, eyes scanning the room, always vigilant. He had saved her from spies, warned her of treachery, and remained her anchor through every moment of doubt. Tonight, his loyalty would be tested as much as hers. Lord stepped forward, face pale but determined. "Princess," he said, voice trembling with anger and desperation, "you cannot ignore what is happening. The council will not obey. Your people will suffer if you do not act." His eyes locked on his. "And what do you suggest?" Her voice was calm, but it carried the weight of command. "Shall I bend to your ambition and betray my own people?" The hall grew silent. Every eye followed her, every ear waited for her next word. She had anticipated this confrontation. She had prepared herself, and was there, silent, unwavering, a human who would not be swayed by fear or flattery. His jaw tightened. "You think loyalty will save you. You think one human can change the course of what is inevitable." Stepped forward, gaze unyielding. "Loyalty is stronger than fear, stronger than greed, and yes, sometimes one human is enough." His hand rested on the hilt of his blade, but he did not move. He did not need to. His presence alone was a shield, a statement that she was not alone, that her courage was not a solitary flame. Suddenly, a loud crash echoed through the hall. Two counselors lunged toward her, trying to strike at the princess, while others created a distraction, but moved instantly, intercepting them. Steel met steel in quick, precise motions. His heart raced, but she did not falter. She had trained for moments like this, not with weapons, but with courage, with resolve. She shouted commands, directing palace guards to contain the attackers. Her voice rang with authority, cutting through the chaos. The counselors' plots unraveled before her eyes, their treachery exposed. They had underestimated her. And most importantly, they had underestimated the human who refused to betray her. When the last conspirator was restrained, turned to the council. Silence hung heavy in the air. "Let this be a lesson," she said, voice steady, commanding. "Betrayal cannot succeed where loyalty is true, and courage cannot be broken when hearts are steadfast." Stepped beside her, silent but resolute. She met his gaze, and for the first time in weeks she allowed herself to feel relief, gratitude, even pride, not in herself alone, but in the one who had never wavered. His expression shifted from anger to fear. He realized that power without loyalty was meaningless, that ambition without conscience was hollow. His voice softened slightly, but it still carried strength. "Tonight we faced betrayal. Tomorrow we will build trust again. But remember this, one true heart can change the fate of many. One human can see what others overlook. One human can remind you that courage is not given, it is chosen." The council lowered their heads. Some whispered apologies, some offered hesitant bows, and knew that while treachery would always exist, the power of loyalty had proven itself stronger tonight. Finally allowed himself a small nod. No words were needed. In the quiet acknowledgement understood something profound. The bond between trust and courage could withstand any storm. The palace, once tense and threatening, seemed to breathe a little easier. The shadows still lingered, but they had been pushed back, at least for now. Turned to look at, her heart swelling with emotions she had not fully understood until now. Relief, trust, and a deep, unshakable respect. One human had seen the truth when all others were blind. One human had reminded her that even in a world of betrayal, loyalty could shine brighter than any threat. And in that moment she knew the throne was not just a seat of power. It was a responsibility, a test. And tonight it had been passed, not alone, but together. With at her side, stepped forward into the future, ready for whatever storms awaited. For loyalty, courage, and truth had become her strongest weapons. And no shadow could ever extinguish that flame. The morning sun spilled gold across the palace, washing away the shadows of the previous night. The halls, once tense and threatening, now felt alive, but knew better than to think the storm had passed completely. Betrayal lingered like a faint chill, a memory she would never forget. She stood on the balcony, looking over the city below. Her people moved about their lives, unaware of how close the kingdom had come to chaos. Her heart swelled with pride and a quiet, fierce determination. Stood silently behind her as he had stood through every danger, every whisper of treachery. He did not speak, but she did not need words. His loyalty had saved her, strengthened her, reminded her that courage was not a solitary act. She said softly, turning to him, "I could not have faced them alone, not once, not ever." He met her gaze, steady, unwavering. "You would have faced them anyway," he said simply. "I only reminded you that some hearts do not waver." His lips curved into a small smile. Simple words, but they carried everything. Trust, respect, gratitude, and perhaps something more, a bond that went beyond duty, beyond loyalty, into the territory of unspoken understanding. The council had been restructured. Those who sought power above all else had been removed. Lessons were learned. Fear had not guided her decisions, loyalty and truth had, and the palace, though still full of whispers, now carried a sense of cautious respect. Walked through the grand hall at her side. Her footsteps echoed in the crystal corridors, but this time they felt lighter, stronger. She was not alone. The people of the palace began to gather. Whispers turned to words, then to cheers. They recognized her courage. They recognized the strength of a leader who would not yield to fear, who would not be manipulated by treachery. And above all, they saw the loyalty that had stood unwavering at her side, a human heart that refused to turn away. In the throne room, faced the council one last time. "Today, loyalty has triumphed," she declared. "Not just mine, but ours. We are bound not by fear, not by ambition, but by the trust we place in one another. Let this be the foundation of our kingdom, loyalty, courage, and truth." Remained at her side, silent but present. And as spoke, she felt the weight of her crown lighter than it had ever been. The throne was no longer just a seat of power, it was a symbol of something greater. Of hope, of courage, of loyalty that could withstand any storm. The council bowed, humbled. They had learned that ambition without conscience was fragile, and that betrayal, no matter how clever, could never stand against a true heart. Turned to the palace windows, watching the light dance on the crystal walls. Somewhere in the city, a child laughed. Somewhere, a trader smiled, a farmer rested. The kingdom breathed again, and for the first time, she allowed herself to believe that peace, however fragile, was possible. She placed a hand on his shoulder. "You noticed what others did not," she said softly. "You reminded me that loyalty is stronger than fear, stronger than any ambition. I will not forget this." He bowed his head slightly. "I only did what I must," he said, "but it is enough to know you see it, that you value it." His eyes glistened. She realized something profound. The greatest victories were not measured by battles fought or enemies defeated. They were measured by the hearts that stood steadfast, the courage that refused to waver, and the bonds forged in the darkest moments. The palace was no longer a place of shadows. The kingdom would rebuild, stronger than before. And in every corridor, in every hall, the story of a princess who faced betrayal and a human who saw loyalty would be remembered. Looked at one last time, and in that quiet gaze, a world of unspoken emotion passed between them. Gratitude, trust, and the knowledge that some hearts were capable of changing everything. The twin suns rose higher, spilling warmth across the city. Shadows fled before the light, and Princess, with at her side, stepped forward, not just as a ruler, but as a symbol of hope, courage, and unwavering loyalty. In a kingdom of ambition and deceit, one human heart had made all the difference. And that difference had saved them all,